I live in Dorset, Vermont, and if you've never been there, it's hard to explain just how isolated it feels. Mountains rise like walls. Forests stretch for miles without interruption. Cell service drops without warning. Once you step off the main road, it doesn't take much to feel like you've left civilization entirely. That isolation is part of why I love it. Behind my house, there's a stretch of woods I've walked since I was a teenager. If you cut through the trees at just the right angle, you hit a mountain trail that locals use for hiking, jogging, and the occasional bike ride. I run it several times a week. I know every curve, every dip in elevation, every spot where the trees open just enough to let the sun set through. It feels safe because it feels familiar. That illusion shattered one evening in early fall. I got home from work around 6, tired but restless. The kind of tired where sitting still feels worse than moving. I changed out of my work clothes and into my running gear, clipped my coonhound Murphy's leash to her collar, and checked the time. 6:45 p.m. Murphy was already waiting by the door, tail wagging lazily. She was a perfect running partner. Never pulled, never lagged behind, always matched my pace like she was reading my mind. Calm, alert, loyal in a quiet way. We stepped into the woods as the light began to fade. The first 5 minutes were just walking, letting Murphy sniff around and settle in. Then we eased into a slow jog. Leaves crunched underfoot. The air was cool enough to sting my lungs just a little. That familiar rhythm took over, the sound of breath, footfalls, leash hardware softly clicking. I was looking up at the tree lean when it happened. Murphy stopped dead. I didn't notice immediately. It wasn't until the leash tugged hard against my hand that I stumbled forward and nearly yanked her neck. I stopped, annoyed at first, and turned around. Murphy wasn't looking at me. Her body was tense, ears bouncing slightly as she focused on something behind us. That hound dog alertness. The kind that means she heard or smelled something she didn't like. We were deep in the forest. It could have been anything. A deer, a squirrel, another dog. I tugged gently on the leash. Come on, Murph. She didn't budge. I waited a few seconds, letting her satisfy her curiosity, but she stayed locked in place, staring down the trail behind us. That's when I saw him. A man stood further down the path, partially obscured by trees. He wasn't hiding, just standing there, watching. I couldn't make out his face clearly, but I could tell his attention was fixed on Murphy and me. My first instinct was to be friendly. Vermont trail etiquette. I raised my hand and gave a small wave. He didn't wave back. At least, I don't think he did. I glanced down at Murphy as I tugged her leash again, urging her forward. After a moment, she complied, falling back in a stride beside me, but not without looking over her shoulder. Twice. I told myself it was nothing. People sometimes waited for me to pass before continuing, especially if they weren't comfortable around dogs. It wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the timing. It was getting dark, and most people were off the trails by now. Still, I pushed the thought aside. About a minute later, Murphy stopped again. This time, she barked. A sharp, warning bark that cut clean through the quiet forest. I looked ahead and saw him immediately. Another man stood further up the trail, walking slowly toward us. He wasn't jogging. He wasn't hiking with purpose. Just walking. His posture was stiff, his pace deliberate. I waved again, more reflex than friendliness. He didn't respond. I stopped and pulled Murphy close, holding her collar. I figured he'd pass us, and that would be that. But the closer he got, the slower he moved. Well, he was close enough to hear me. I spoke up. She's friendly. You can pass. He didn't answer. He just stared at me. No smile. No nod. Just unbroken eye contact as he continued forward, step by step, like he hadn't heard a word I said. My stomach tightened. That's when Murphy spun around and started barking behind us. I turned, and my heart nearly stopped. The first man was back, not standing down the trail anymore, not watching from a distance. He was 5 feet away, closing in. My brain didn't even have time to form a coherent thought before arms wrapped around my torso from behind. Strong, sudden, crushing the air out of my lungs. At the same time, the man in front of me lunged. Murphy exploded. Her calm demeanor vanished in an instant, replaced by something feral and furious. Her barks turned into deep, violent growls as she lunged toward the man charging us. I felt the grip around me loosen just enough for me to twist sideways. Murphy clamped onto the second man's leg with a force I didn't know she had. He screamed a raw, panic sound and tried to shake her off. She wouldn't let go. The man behind me lost his hold, and I used every ounce of strength I had to slam into the other man's chest, knocking him backward onto the dirt trail. I remember thinking how surreal it was, that this was happening in the same place I'd jogged 100 times without a second thought. Murphy was still latched onto the first man's leg, snarling like an animal possessed. I grabbed her collar, shouting her name, fighting to pull her off. When she finally released him, we ran. We didn't look back. I don't know how fast we ran, only that my lungs burned and my legs screamed, and fear carried us the rest of the way. The trees blurred past. Branches scratched at my arms. I didn't stop until my house was in sight. Inside, I locked the door and collapsed to the floor. Murphy pressed against me, shaking. She wasn't hurt. I checked her over twice, then a third time. Not a scratch. I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet of the house, realizing how close I'd come to something far worse. That night changed how I see those trails. It also cemented something else in my mind, something I'll never forget. Murphy didn't stop us that night because she was curious. She stopped us because she knew. By the time winter settled over Dorset, I'd stopped running the trails at night. I didn't tell anyone why. Outwardly, nothing had changed. I went to work. I smiled at neighbors. I nodded politely at people in the grocery store who talked about snowfall totals and road conditions. Inside, though, something stayed coiled tight, like my body had learned a new way to exist. One where danger was always nearby, just out of sight. Murphy noticed. She followed me more closely than before, always positioning herself between me and the door or me and the windows. She slept lighter, lifting her head at the smallest sound. Sometimes she growled in her sleep, a low vibration that rattled in her chest. The house itself didn't help. It was old, early 1900s, thick wooden beams, narrow hallways, and a front porch that creaked even when the wind shifted. In the summer, it felt charming. In the winter, with snow piled high and darkness falling by 4:30, it felt like something that had outlived too many occupants. The first knock came on a Tuesday night. It was just after 8. I was in the kitchen rinsing a mug, Murphy lying at my feet. The TV murmured in the other room, something forgettable playing quietly in the background. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. Murphy was on her feet instantly. Her ears went up. Her body stiffened. She didn't bark, not yet. She walked to the kitchen doorway and stared toward the front of the house, tail frozen in place. I wiped my hands on a towel and felt that familiar tightening in my chest. No one ever came by unannounced. I stepped into the hallway and flicked on the porch light. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see a shape, someone standing just outside, close enough that their silhouette blurred against the pane. I hesitated. Hello. I called. No response. Murphy let out a low growl that made the hair on my arm stand up. I moved closer to the door, but didn't unlock it. Can I help you? Still nothing. After a few seconds, the figure shifted. I saw the shadow step backward, then disappear entirely. I waited, listening. No footsteps. No crunch of snow. Just silence. I stood there for a full minute before locking the deadbolt again, though it already was, and turning off the porch light. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The next knock came the following night. Same time, same pattern. Knock, knock, knock. Murphy reacted faster this time, barking sharply as she sprinted to the door. I followed more cautiously, heart pounding. Again, the porch light revealed a single figure standing close to the door. Too close. Who is it? I asked. The person tilted their head slightly, like they were listening. Hello. I tried again. Slowly, a hand lifted and pressed flat against the glass. I froze. The palm was pale, fingers long and thin, nails dirty. The hand stayed there for a few seconds before dropping away. Then the figure stepped back and vanished into the darkness again. I didn't sleep much that night. By the third night, I was already tense before the knock even came. I'd moved a chair under the front door handle, more for my own peace of mind than anything else. Murphy paced the house, checking windows, sniffing at corners. At exactly 8:07, knock, knock, knock. Murphy barked violently this time, throwing herself at the door hard enough that it rattled in its frame. "Go away," I shouted, my voice sharper than I intended. The knocking stopped. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then knock. Once. Slower. Heavier. I backed away from the door, every instinct screaming at me not to open it. Murphy stayed planted in front of it, hackles raised, teeth bared at the wood like she could see through it. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Not inside the house. Right outside the door. Slow. Controlled. Intentional. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency line, whispering my address, explaining what was happening. The dispatcher told me to stay inside. Doors locked. Officers were on the way. The breathing stopped. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear movement at all. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, they found nothing. No footprints close to the door. No sign of forced entry. Just disturbed snow further down the driveway, like someone had been standing there for a long time. The officer asked if I recognized anyone. I didn't. The knock stopped after that. For a while. February came with heavier snow, isolating the house even more. I worked from home when I could. Murphy and I stuck close together. I almost convinced myself it had been some kind of coincidence, some local drunk, some weirdo testing doors. Then the power went out. It was a Friday night, right after a storm. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows hard enough to make the glass hum. The lights flickered once, twice, and then everything went dark. Murphy growled before the silence even settled. I grabbed a flashlight and lit a few candles, moving carefully through the house. The storm muffled sound, making the world feel far away, like I was sealed inside a bubble of darkness. I just sat down on the couch when, knock, knock, knock. My blood went cold. The porch light was dead. The door was just a rectangle of black now, impossible to see through. Murphy didn't bark this time. She stood perfectly still, staring at the door, body trembling. "Please," a voice said quietly from the other side. "I know you're in there." My heart slammed against my ribs. The voice sounded calm, reasonable, almost gentle. "I just need to come inside," it continued. "It's cold." I didn't respond. Murphy began to snarl, a deep, animal sound that echoed down the hallway. The voice sighed. "You have a dog," it said. "That's okay. I like dogs." I felt sick. "How do you know that?" I asked before I could stop myself. There was a pause. "I've been watching." The words settled into the room like poison. I backed away slowly, phone clutched in my hand, whispering to Murphy as I retreated toward the bedroom. The knocking didn't follow me. Instead, the handle rattled. Once. Twice. Then stopped. I stayed locked in that bedroom for hours. Murphy pressed against me, until the power finally came back and dawn crept in through the windows. When the police searched the area again, they found footprints this time. They circled the house. Every window. Every door. Including the bedroom window. I sold the house 3 months later. I still don't know who knocked. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Murphy lifts her head suddenly, I remember that voice. And I know whoever it was didn't stop because they wanted to. They stopped because something made them. I've always hated basements. That isn't something I usually admit out loud, because people tend to laugh it off. They picture cobwebs, old furniture, maybe a few spiders. They think fear of basements is childish, something you're supposed to grow out of. But fear doesn't always come from imagination. Sometimes it comes from memory. When my parents finally decided to sell the house I grew up in, I felt relief more than sadness. I was already in college by then, already sleeping somewhere else most nights, already living a life that barely touched that place anymore. Still, when I went back one last time to help pack, the smell of the basement hit me the second I opened the door. Damp concrete, old metal, something stale and sour underneath it all. The smell hadn't changed. Neither had the feeling. I hadn't been down there in years, not since the night my parents called the police and refused to tell my brother and me what they'd found. I was a kid then, too young to understand, too young to push for answers. Now, standing at the top of those same steps as an adult, I realized something terrifying. I didn't actually know what happened down there. only that whatever it was had scared my parents badly enough to change them. The basement light flickered on when I pulled the chain. Same weak yellow glow. Same cluttered chaos. Boxes stacked haphazardly. Old furniture shoved against the walls. The hockey table still leaned crookedly in the corner, warped from years of humidity. I took one step down, then another. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but I forced myself to keep going. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was grown now. Nothing bad had happened to me personally. Everything had explanations. Didn't it? The memories came back without asking permission. My brother and I, sprawled on the floor, controllers in our hands. The Super Nintendo humming softly as we raced pixelated cars across a blurry track. The basement door closed behind us, the boiler room dark and quiet like always. Then, the slam. The dryer door crashing shut so hard it rattled the walls. Both of us had frozen. I remembered looking at my brother, his face pale, eyes wide. I remembered calling out for our mom, assuming she'd been doing laundry the whole time. She hadn't. The room had been empty. Standing there now, decades later, I could still hear that sound echoing in my head. I shook it off and kept moving, telling myself memory has a way of exaggerating fear. The dryer was still there, shoved into the corner of the laundry room. The boiler loomed beside it, pipes snaking up into the ceiling like veins. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I was taping up boxes when I heard it. A click. I froze. The sound came from behind me. The television. The old box TV sat on a rickety stand against the far wall, unplugged, or at least it should have been. I hadn't touched it. No one else was in the house. The screen flickered to life, static hissing softly. My heart started pounding. I stood slowly, turning toward it, every muscle tense. The static shifted, lines rolling across the screen as if it were trying to tune itself to something. No, I whispered. The sound cut out abruptly. The screen went black. I stood there for a long moment, listening, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. I checked the cord. It wasn't plugged in. I backed away from the TV, suddenly feeling like I was being watched. The basement felt smaller now, the ceiling lower, the air heavier. That was when the boiler room door creaked. Just slightly. I stared at it. The door had always stuck. You had to pull it hard to open it, and when it closed, it latched with a solid thunk. It didn't creak. Slowly, the door moved inward, no more than an inch. I took a step back. "Hello," I said, hating how thin my voice sounded. No answer. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, fingers shaking, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dimness, illuminating the doorway. The boiler room was dark. Too dark. The light didn't seem to reach very far inside, like something was swallowing it. I thought about my parents that night. Their strange silence, the way my dad's voice had sounded wrong when he finally explained, years later, that something was holding the door shut. Something, not someone. I should have left. I know that now. But fear has a way of rooting you in place, especially when part of you needs answers more than safety. I stepped closer. The door moved again. This time it opened fully. The smell hit me immediately, stronger than the rest of the basement, metallic and wet, like rust and stagnant water mixed together. My stomach churned. I shined a flashlight inside. The room looked wrong. The walls seemed farther apart than I remembered. The pipes overhead stretched longer, twisting into the shadows. The dryer and boiler were still there, but they looked older somehow, more corroded. Then I saw the marks. Handprints. They were smeared along the wall near the doorframe, dark and greasy, like someone had dragged their hands across the concrete while being pulled backward. My breath came shallow. I turned to leave. That's when I felt it. A soft impact against the back of my head. Not hard enough to knock me down, just enough to get my attention. Something rolled across the floor and tapped against my shoe. I looked down. A red rubber ball. The same kind my brother and I used to throw around when we were kids. My chest tightened painfully. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." The ball rolled again, this time toward the boiler room. Inviting. The door began to close. Slowly, I bolted. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might black out. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, pressing my back against it as I tried to catch my breath. The house was silent. Too silent. I stayed there until my legs stopped shaking, then forced myself to move. I finished packing the rest of the house without going back downstairs. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom for the last time. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound. A click. I held my breath. Another click followed, louder this time. The TV. Downstairs. I sat up in bed, listening as static filled the house, drifting up through the vents like a whisper. Then, faint but unmistakable, I heard a thud. Something hitting the floor, over and over again, like a rubber ball bouncing. I didn't go downstairs. In the morning, I told my parents everything. My mom went pale. My dad didn't say anything for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "That's why we never let you go down there alone," he said. "What did you see?" I asked. That night, he hesitated. "Someone had been living in the walls," he finally said. "Or something like that. We never found them. Just signs." "What kind of signs?" I pressed. He looked at me, eyes tired. "Small things," he said. "Toys moved, doors closing. The feeling that if we opened the wrong one, something would come out that wasn't supposed to be there." The house sold quickly. The new owners renovated the basement. They sealed the boiler room. I still dream about it sometimes. About a dark room that's bigger on the inside than it should be. About a ball rolling back toward me. And about the certainty that whatever was down there wasn't haunting the house. It was waiting. If you live far enough away from other people, you stop fearing the dark. At least, that's what I used to believe. On a farm, darkness isn't unusual. It's normal. It's expected. There are no streetlights, no neighbors' porch lamps bleeding into the night. Once the sun drops behind the tree line, the world shrinks to whatever your headlights or flashlight can reach. Everything else simply disappears. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, on land my family has owned for generations. Cornfields stretch out on three sides of the house, tall and dense in the summer months, leaving only the dirt road and a thin strip of lawn between us and the woods. It's just my wife, our infant son, and me, plus our Rottweiler, Jesse. Jesse isn't just a pet. He's protection. From May to October, he sleeps outside in his doghouse, tethered with a long-mounted lead that gives him plenty of room to move without letting him wander off. He's trained to bark when something doesn't belong, and in all the years we'd lived there, he almost never barked at night. Animals, wind, the occasional fox. That was it, which is why the sound of Jesse losing his mind at 1:30 in the morning jolted both my wife and me straight up in bed. Not his normal bark. This was frantic, deep, aggressive, continuous. "He never barks like that," my wife whispered, clutching the blanket tighter around her chest. "I know," I said. I sat there for a moment, listening. Jesse's barking wasn't random. It was focused, directed, toward the crops. "I'll check," I said, swinging my legs out of bed. My wife grabbed my wrist. "Don't be stupid." "I won't," I lied. I slipped on my boots and threw my robe over my shoulders. When I stepped outside, the cold hit me immediately, sharp and sobering. The moon was barely visible through heavy clouds, and the cornfield loomed like a wall of shadows beyond the yard. Jesse noticed me instantly, tail stiff, ears locked forward, but he didn't stop barking. He didn't even look at me. That alone made my stomach tighten. "Easy, boy," I said quietly, stepping closer. "What is it?" His body was rigid, muscles tense, teeth bared between barks. I followed his line of sight. Nothing. Just corn. Row after row of tall, dry stalks whispering softly in the breeze. I went back inside for a flashlight and Jesse's leash. I wasn't about to go wandering into that field unprepared. When I clipped the leash on his collar, Jesse knew immediately what it meant. He surged forward. I barely had time to brace myself before he started pulling me toward the crops like he knew exactly where he was going. The second we crossed into the cornfield, the world closed in around us. The stalks towered overhead, blotting out what little moonlight there was. My flashlight beam bounced erratically as Jesse dragged me forward, leaves scraping against my arms and face. "Jesse, slow down," I whispered. He didn't. His barking stopped. That was worse. The only sounds now were our footsteps and the rustling of corn brushing against itself somewhere ahead of us. Jesse's pace slowed, but he didn't stop pulling. His nose stayed low, tracking something I couldn't see. My mouth felt dry. "Hello," I called out. "This is private property." No response. We moved deeper. The air felt wrong, thick, heavy like it pressed against my chest. The beam of my flashlight barely cut through the narrow rows. Everything beyond a few feet dissolved into blackness. Then Jesse stopped. Completely. He froze in place, hackles raised, staring straight ahead. I followed his gaze. Nothing. At least, nothing I could see. We stood there in silence for what felt like forever. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. Then the corn moved. Not from wind. From something pushing through it. Close. Very close. Jesse's head snapped left. Then right. Then left again. He started barking again, but now it sounded different, confused, alarmed, uncertain. As if whatever was out there wasn't staying in one place. "Hey," I shouted, my voice cracking. "You're trespassing. Sheriff's already been called." I don't know where the courage came from to say that, but fear makes liars of us all. For a moment, everything went still. Then came the scream. It was a woman's voice. High, panicked, raw. It cut through the night like a blade. Jesse lunged forward, dragging me after him. My boots slipped in the loose dirt as we crashed through the rows, the scream echoing and warping as if it were moving, pulling us deeper into the field. "Help!" the voice cried again. We ran. The more we ran, the farther away it seemed. That's when I realized something was wrong. The scream wasn't getting quieter because we were losing it. It was being pulled away from us, like bait on a string. Suddenly it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Jesse halted again, chest heaving. His head swiveled wildly, ears twitching as if he were hearing something I couldn't. Then I heard it. Someone rushing through the corn. Fast. Close enough that the stalks bent and snapped less than 5 feet away from my face. I spun toward the sound, heart in my throat. Nothing. But Jesse knew. I dropped the leash. "Go," I whispered. "Get them." Jesse bolted. He disappeared into the corn in seconds, his barking fading as he gave chase. I stood there alone, shaking, suddenly aware of how small and vulnerable I was without him. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I listened. Jesse's barks grew more distant, then scattered, echoing from multiple directions, as if whatever he was chasing wasn't moving in a straight line. That's when I felt it. Fingers, gripping my shoulder. Hard. Not a tap. Not a brush. A firm, painful squeeze. I screamed. I didn't look back. I ran. I tore through the corn blindly, crashing through rows, my lungs burning, my heart threatening to explode. Behind me, the stalks rustled violently, but I didn't know if I was being followed or if fear was just filling in the gaps. I burst out of the field onto the back lawn, nearly collapsing as I stumbled toward the house. The oak tree flashed past. Jesse's empty doghouse stood like an accusation. I slammed through the back door and locked it, then locked it again. Every door, every window. My wife was waiting for me, white-faced, our son clutched to her chest. "There's someone out there," I said, my voice shaking. "Maybe more than one." We called the sheriff. They told us to stay inside. We waited. Every second felt like an hour. Jesse didn't come back. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, gripping a fireplace poker like it was a lifeline. My wife didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She just watched the windows. An hour later, headlights finally cut across the yard. A deputy stepped out of his cruiser, hand on his belt. And there was Jesse, sitting calmly on the back deck, tail wagging. Like nothing had happened. The deputy took my statement, but didn't offer much reassurance. He admitted it outright. He wasn't going into that cornfield in the dark. Neither was I. Jesse slept inside for the next week. Nothing else happened. No screams. No barking. No movement in the crops. But sometimes, late at night, when the winds shift just right, I swear I hear someone moving out there. And I know, deep down, that whatever grabbed my shoulder wasn't lost. It was testing me, seeing how far it could push. And one night, it might try again.